thank you everybody for joining us for this installment of Navigating the New Normal. I'm Dion Gordon, Tech Birmingham. You all are familiar with the spiel. We have another exciting episode, if you will, lined up for you all. In thinking about this particular topic, I'm reminded of a study. I believe it was the World Economic Forum, and they talked about the skills that would be most in demand going into this fourth industrial revolution, the next 20, 30 years. What is that going to look like? And one of the top skills was creativity. And it makes sense when we think about it. We're going to have to solve complex challenges. We're going to have to do so in a collaborative environment, and creativity is going to be a key skill in helping us to navigate these new spaces. And I think we're kind of seeing the necessity of creativity just in this year alone. 2020 has forced us to be very creative. And so we're going to be joined by a person with a remarkable story and background. I won't even get into it for fear of stealing his thunder, and also recognizing that he could do a much better job of delivering it than I can. But all that to say, you all are in for a treat, and he is going to be sharing interactively with us ways to still remain creative, how to foster creative teams in a time where that might be very difficult to do. So definitely you have that to look forward to. You also, a little bit later, have something else to look forward to, and that is the Cyber Now Summit. If you're trying to put the pieces together, you might be thinking about Alabama Cyber Now, our cybersecurity conference. That has evolved. It is now the Cyber Now Summit. And of course, we have taken that virtual. Tickets are on sale now at a very good price point, I might add, because obviously the format has changed, but the content is still going to be the same, and it's still going to be very helpful. And so we want to make sure that you all know about that. Go to the website. It is cybernowsummit.com. Of course, we put that on with our friends, the Birmingham Infraguard chapter and Central Alabama ISSA. This is the 5th year, and so we're super excited about what we have lined up for you all. So again, make sure you go to that, cybernowsummit.com. And then, of course, the recording of this video will be uploaded to YouTube, and that is at youtube.com/techbham. As always, shout out to the team, Rebecca and Christina, for doing a tremendous job of keeping this ship moving forward and bringing all of this together. So thank you all. I appreciate you all who are joining us right now in attendance, and who all will be joining us once we upload this and you will see the recording. Thank you all for joining and making time for this as well. I believe that is about it. Christina, how about I turn it over to you and
Perfect.
Give us a little bit of housekeeping.
All right, so housekeeping. So if you are just joining us, do not panic that you have been elevated to a panelist. This is going to be an interactive program today, and so we would like for you to participate as you are comfortable. So everybody has been elevated to panelist to allow for that to happen. If you have questions throughout the program, just go ahead and throw them into chat. We will monitor the chat and make sure that those questions are answered. And now I'm going to let Dan take it away. He's going to give us the whole rundown of what we need to know for today's program. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm really excited to be here talking to Tech Birmingham. I've been following along with these navigating the new normals and everything that you're doing here, and I'm proud to be associated with it. Also, thanks to TJ for joining. TJ is a loyal follower of human intelligence and the work that we do. And I would like to make sure that everyone knows that you're invited to turn on your video, right? Being able to see people and communicate with people is always important, and it's particularly important if you are trying to get more creativity. If you're just simply in a place where you can't do it, or feel like you simply don't want to do it, that's fine too, but I would love to have more faces on the screen, and I know that you'll get more out of it as well. There's going to be nothing that's embarrassing or pushing you away. Also, as Christina said, the chat's open. So if you have questions as we go along, please put those questions in the chat, and we will get to those as we go. And we'll also have some time at the end to talk about different things and creativity and sort of explore some other avenues. So what I would like to do first, though, is ask folks if you can give me some uses for this object. So we have TJ and Justin that are there. This is a brick. So it's one each brick. So TJ, would you mind giving a brief introduction of yourself, just who you are, what you do, and give us a use for that object, please?
Thank you very much. TJ Junadu, Director, Business Development and Marketing at Sigayo. New implant into Birmingham and loving it. It's funny, the first thing that came to mind when I saw the brick, to be honest, was throwing it through a glass window.
Perfect. Break at a window. That's good. Okay. And Justin, you were kind enough to turn on your video. Can you give us a use for the brick as well?
I just thought about a weapon, just hitting somebody in the back of the head with it. I guess that says a lot about me.
Very good. No, that's great. Let's go to John, please. John Rhymes.
Oh,
So
you're on mute.
You're still on mute there, John?
Yes, making something from it.
Making something, great. Do you have an idea about what you might make?
Well, if you have enough of them, make a building.
Make a building, perfect. Okay, now let me switch up the question just a little bit. Now I would like folks to give me creative uses for this brick. So think about some creative way to use this brick. And we'll go to David, who's also kind enough to have his video on. David, what do you have in mind?
You can anchor your raft as you're tubing.
Okay, raft anchor, very nice. And Christy, what about you?
I was still thinking on the building, create things with it.
Okay. Can you think of maybe some creative way to use it?
Not sure right now.
Okay, that's great. So if you think of one, please speak up. And let's go to Christina. You're on as well. What about a creative way to use the brick?
Well, my kids would probably insist on painting it and putting it in our garden.
Okay, great. And then inside the chat, we've got some folks, Courtney saying landscape edging, and then Rebecca saying a paperweight. So I've asked hundreds and hundreds of people this question, and in fact, it turns out exactly the same way as it works here as well, right? It happens the same way because we're all basically the same when it comes to creativity. So what happens is when I ask folks, what are some uses for this brick? That question goes into your brain, and the left side of your brain, now to be clear, it takes your entire brain to be creative, but the left side of your brain starts cataloging all the places that you've seen or heard of a brick being used. So the answers are pretty typical, right? The top three answers in the first part of the question are building something with it, breaking something with it, or a paperweight. And in fact, all three of those came out on this one, because it's simply your brain saying, here's a brick, what is the context for a brick and how can it be used? And here are all the places that I've seen or heard of it being used. And in fact, there's a process inside your brain that's called latent inhibition. And what latent inhibition does is it applies a filter to thoughts even before you have them, right? It's a pre-conscious process. And latent inhibition says that it lets you know which ideas are appropriate for the question that's being asked. So in this case, latent inhibition is pretty tight, right? It's a relatively new group. You're on Zoom. You're not used to maybe being on camera with the folks here. So your latent inhibition filters are really tight. But in one group that I did this exercise with, I asked, what are some uses for the brick, and then what are the creative uses for the brick? And probably the most creative answer I had was a guy who said that he could use the brick to file down his bunions. So, right. So that bunion idea, though, was inside of his brain before I asked, what are the creative uses for that brick? But his latent inhibition was already filtering that out. He didn't even have the choice for that to come to mind because it never came up. His brain was keeping that out as an answer that wasn't appropriate. But as soon as I say, what are some creative uses for the brick, those filters start to open. And now the right side of your brain Instead of working to catalog all the places that you've seen or heard of a brick being used, now your brain starts thinking about possibilities. What are some things that I can do with this brick? What are some things that are related maybe to rafting? Or what would happen if I crushed that brick and now I did something with the powder? Or what would happen if I used the weight of the brick for something other than a paperweight, right? So the anchor for the raft is pretty good. And now those filters under latent inhibition have opened up, and now you essentially have the opportunity to choose whether you're going to share that answer with the rest of us. And when that happens, creativity is no longer a question of biology, right? Creativity becomes a question of psychology. Do you trust this group enough to share that you have bunions that are so bad that you need a brick to take care of them? And in fact, researchers at Yale found the same thing. So at Yale, they took an undergraduate class, they divided them into 3 groups. One group they asked to write a creative essay, one group they asked to write an analytical essay, and one group they just asked to write an essay. And then they grade those essays for creativity. And wouldn't you know, the folks that they asked to write a more creative essay wrote more creative essays, right? So the easiest lesson about how to make yourself or your team more creative is simply to ask for it. And when you ask for it and you respond in a psychologically safe way and you promote an environment that allows people to share their ideas, you can't help but get more creativity. And that's going to be what we talk about today, how to lead yourself and your team for more creativity. And here's the bottom line for what we're talking about. Whether you're trying to lead for creativity remotely or you're trying to lead for creativity back in your traditional work environment, the principles remain the same. The same things that make you more creative in traditional work are the same principles that are going to make you more creative in remote work. And the one that we're going to talk most about today is trust and how to build trust, how to keep trust. But we'll also have some very practical tips for how you can go about the process of being creative as well. Let me take a quick poll, both in chat as well as just asking the folks that are on the screen. I want you to give me a 1 to 5 rating of how happy you were with creativity in the traditional work environment. So if you were essentially not happy at all, you'd give it a 1. If you think that your traditional work environment where you worked before, or the environment, the location, the office where you were working before the virus was incredibly creative, you would give it a 5. I just want to take a quick temperature check. 1 if you think it was not very creative, and 5 if you think it was very creative. So we got a 4 from TJ. Thank you. We got a 2 from David, a 4 from John. We got 4s, 5s. Courtney works at a law firm. She says 1. 3s, good. We got a 4 from Christy there. Nice. All right, so not bad, not bad. So it's important to make sure that we are all talking about the same thing as well. So let me give you a quick definition of creativity. And this is the one that we use in our work at Human Intelligence, where we teach folks those skills to make themselves and their teams more creative so they can solve tough problems. So Teresa Amabile is a Harvard researcher. She spent her entire career studying creativity, what makes people creative, what makes organizations creative, how can you get more creativity from both adults and children. And this is the definition that she uses. She says that creativity is the production of ideas that are new and useful. The production of ideas that are new and useful. So there's 3 parts to this. 1, it's the production piece, right? Ideas have to be produced. They have to come out of your brain and actually be turned into something that can be judged by other people, essentially, right? It has to be more or less tangible. Now, it could be a song or it could be a speech or something like that, but it has to be something that's actually produced. Then she says they have to be new. So it's not new as in the first time ever on the planet, but it's novel for this context. It's some new application of or some new combination of different things to solve some problem. And the last part is it has to be useful. So it has to actually work for the thing that you were trying to, the problem that you're trying to solve, right? If it doesn't work, it's just a bad idea. The other important thing to remember is her idea of what it takes to make any person creative. Those are the 3 things that you see in the circles there. She says that folks first have to have expertise, right? I'm a fairly creative person, but I'm not a creative brain surgeon because I don't know anything about brain surgery. But in a field where I have some expertise, now I can start to combine different ideas. I can make new things and come up with ideas that are creative. The second are just some basic creative thinking skills. And those are stuff that we're talking about today. Those are things that you can learn the basics of even on YouTube or in a half-day session, and now you can practice them over time and get better at them. So that's never the thing that slows people down. But the one that she says is the most important characteristic is intrinsic motivation, right? The intrinsic motivation is the most important characteristic to a person who is creative or a person who does creative things, because intrinsic motivation builds resilience, right? When you think about any creativity story that you've heard of, nobody says, I had this great idea, I tried it, it worked, and now I made a lot of money and I made a big difference in the world, right? The story is always, I tried it, it didn't work, I tried something else, I got a little bit better at it, I kept trying, and eventually I was able to do something that was good. And that's what intrinsic motivation does. It gives you the resilience to keep going. So let me tell you about one case in my life where all of these things came together. So I retired from the Air Force at the end of last year. As I was mentioning to Dion in the beginning, I grew up here in Birmingham, graduated from Hewitt-Trussell High School, and then graduated from Sanford University. I spent a life in the Air Force for about 25 years. I flew fighter A-10s for the first half of my career, and then I was a military diplomat for the second half. But from the summer of 2016 until the summer of 2017, I was assigned to the Air Operations Center in Qatar. So from this Air Operations Center, we ran the day-to-day air operations fighting ISIS over Iraq and Syria. And things were pretty good, right? We had the most advanced aircraft on the planet. So there were F-22s that were available if we needed them. We had the most precise weapons on the planet. You could put a weapon on any spot that you needed to in virtually anywhere in the world, but particularly in Iraq or Syria. You could be incredibly precise with your targeting. We had people who were well-trained from 20 different nations that were there participating. They knew what they were supposed to be doing, and they were very motivated to do it. And we had virtually unlimited cash. We could spend money wherever we needed to spend money to get the mission done. So it's about everything that you could hope for, right? Things are good. Until one day, ISIS developed their own Air Force. Let me get my screen share going for you again. Right, so what ISIS did is they took off-the-shelf drones, right? Off-the-shelf, essentially, toy type of little drones that people can fly around. What you see in the guy's left hand there is a Dji Phantom Drone. So this is something that you could buy on Amazon, and for a couple $1,000 you could own one of these as well. But what ISIS did is they rewired it. So normally it has lights that come on the bottom of that drone, but ISIS rewired it so that instead of having lights coming on and off, now they could release a mechanism that allowed these grenades, which are in the guy's right hand, to fall. But when they first did this, the grenades are not very precise. They would tumble on their way to the ground. So they used a 3D printer, and they printed these back ends, those white pieces that you see there. And then inside the final back end of that tube, what do they use? You all know these from 4th of July cookouts, right? They're badminton birdies. So they put those badminton birdies, shuttlecocks for our friends from across the pond. So they you have these badminton birdies that you put there into the back of these 3D printed tubes onto these grenades. Then they mount them onto this Dji Phantom Drone, and now they have a weapon, right? But the weapon they designed was not individually very militarily powerful. It only has 2 grenades, but if a drone with 2 grenades is flying over you, you're going to pay attention to what's happening there. And that's exactly what was happening with the forces that we were supporting. These little drones would fly over. Now everyone would turn and they would start shooting at the drone that was flying over them, rather than focusing on the rest of the battle that was around them. And you can see this on YouTube. There are videos of ISIS using these drones and then using them for propaganda purposes, as well as the Iraqi forces that we were supporting that were being attacked by them. But what ISIS did is they took away our best weapons, right? In the Department of Defense, we tend to solve problems either through brute force or through trainloads of cash. And while we had the most precise and the most advanced weapons on the planet, you're not going to use an air-to-air missile to shoot down one of these drones. Even if you could, you're shooting it down over the people you're trying to protect, so that's not going to work out very well. And 2, it didn't matter how much money we had. because there wasn't enough jamming systems in the world to buy, to put in all the places you need them in order to shut these down. So ISIS was very creative, right? ISIS was creative. They produced something that was new and useful for their purpose. But what I decided was that if ISIS could be creative, we could be more creative than they were and take away their creativity from them, right? We could fight them with creativity rather than fighting them with money or weapons, because creativity is a lot faster to generate than the weapons or the systems that we needed. So we gave ourselves a 2-week deadline to come up with some ideas that we could put into action right away. And we did. We came up with some great ideas and we were able to roll back the attacks. And after about 6 weeks, there were many fewer attacks. And after about 6 months, as ISIS continued to lose territory, the attacks ground to an end. But here's the secret. The ideas that we came up with, almost none of them were brand new, right? Almost none of them were completely something that came up in the sessions that we were doing. They were usually ideas that were in someone's brain, usually someone working in the basement that knew that this problem was coming. And they saw this problem developing, but our bureaucracy and the culture that we had didn't allow people to share those ideas, right? Those ideas stayed locked inside their brains. Their latent inhibition sometimes would even keep that idea from being shared out. But if that idea was so powerful that it would come into their conscious mind, they would then choose just not to share it, because they didn't think that their idea was going to be accepted or was going to be useful. But as soon as we were able to lift the weight of that bureaucracy just a little bit, those ideas from one person could combine with another and start coming up with something that was really different and could make a difference. So that's what we do, right? We teach people how to do those things. But what it comes back to is essentially trust. And we're going to talk in detail about trust in a second. But I have another exercise if you're interested in doing that. So in the first creativity exercise we did, where you're talking about uses for a brick, that's essentially a divergent thinking exercise. You have one thing and you're trying to think up many different ways of how to use it. And this is often how your creative processes start in most of your businesses, right? You have some new product or a new market or some problem, and you try to come up with as many possible ideas as you can to see how you could address that, right? That's the divergent thinking. But another important part of creativity is the convergent thinking, to narrow down onto one answer that's really the aha moment that unlocks your ability to actually solve the problem. And here's an example of that. I'm going to give you the directions. Directions sound much more difficult than the exercise actually is, but if you stick with me, hear the first example, you're going to get it right away. I'm going to give you 3 words, and these 3 words are connected by a 4th word. That 4th word will allow those 3 words to make either a short compound word or a 2-word phrase. Your job is to figure out what is that 4th word. So for instance, if I said basket, base, and soccer, basket, base, and soccer, what is the word that connects all of those?
Ball.
So ball, perfect, very good. So let's do another one. Let's say cheddar, Swiss, and cake. Cheddar, Swiss, and cake. So Christy, can you say it again? I saw your lips move.
Cheese.
Cheese.
Cheese, perfect, very good. Okay, let's do rocking, wheel, and high. Rocking, wheel, and high. Chair, very good. Let's do sleeping, bean, and trash.
Bag.
Everybody, bag, very good. All right, let's do one more. If you do know the answer, hold on to it for a second, and then you can, if you're on the screen, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. So let's do stick, maker, and point. Stick, maker, and point. But Justin thinks he has it. Let's wait 1 second. Oh, maybe he doesn't have it. So if you are on the screen, you're looking at Christy. So she thinks she has it, but maybe not quite. But let's take a look at what Christy's doing, like when you look at her face, right? So where did her eyes go? Her eyes were no longer looking at the screen, right? Her eyes kind of shift away and they look off into some far off place, right? They're essentially focusing on nothing. So when your brains are trying to solve these types of problems where you're trying to narrow down into one solution, your brains are trying to help you by reducing the stimulus that is coming into your brain. Right? There'll be other people that are so interested in trying to solve this problem that they don't listen to anything I say until I tell them what the answer is, right? They're still trying to work that out in their own brain. So in this case, the answer is match, right? Match stick, match maker, and match point, right? But what's going on there, right? What's happening when you're trying to find that answer? It's not a matter of, throwing up, 1,000 words, if any of those work. Your brain is sort of rotating through some possibilities, and it's doing some pretty intense calculations inside your own mind to find out what are the links between those 3 words to come up with something, until you get it, right? That aha moment where you've figured it out, you've solved the problem, you know that this is clearly the solution to it. This is the same thing that maybe computer programmers would do when they finally were able to figure out what happens, or people who are in science, they put together those things, they know right away, this is it. So this is, your brain is doing what we call, this is the default mode network, right? This is your brain trying to solve problems that's sort of going on in the background. If I didn't tell you what the answer was, some of you, as you were doing other things today, would start thinking about what are those other combinations? What could be the solution to that thing? And you'll continue mulling it over. Have any of you ever experienced where you've had a conversation maybe at work, and then later in the day you thought, man, I should have said this. Like, this would have been the perfect thing to have said right then, right? The situation's passed, but your brain is still working through it. Your brain is still trying to figure out what was going on. So I call it Bitcoin mining in your own brain, right? Your brain is running, still trying to solve these problems, still trying to give you these ideas, while you're not doing something where you're directly focused on, what to say or what to do. So let me ask you this, and you can answer in the chat, or you can come off mute and answer here as well. What are you doing when you typically get your best creative ideas? Like, sort of what situation are you in? Where are you, or what activity are you doing when you get your best creative ideas?
Relaxed listening to music for me is kind of when my mind starts
Okay.
getting creative.
Very good. So Dion's driving. Christina?
I am usually washing dishes when I get my best ideas.
Very good. Good. Courtney is in bed at 3 a.m. Perfect. So actually, these answers are pretty simple, right? John Rhimes, he says the shower. So there was a shower head manufacturer that said that they did a study, and they said that 72% of people in the world say they get their best ideas in the shower. So therefore, you should have a good shower head if you're spending your time in there doing that. Right. The point is that I've asked hundreds of people this question, and nobody has ever said, sitting at my desk at work. Right. Nobody's best ideas come to them when they're sitting at work, focused on some problem, trying to solve it. Right. The best ideas come up when you are not focused on that thing, right? When you've thought about it for a while, maybe you've spent some time focused on it, but then you move away, and then those solutions start coming to you. So in a remote environment, we get the benefit of all of that extra time, right? It's not time because I don't feel like I have more time, but I know the things that I'm doing are not things that are where I'm having to sit in a meeting at work, or things that I'm having to do these basic tasks that consume my thinking ability. I have more opportunities to maybe go for a walk, or if there's plenty of dishes to wash, if dishwashing is what gets me the ideas, and I can take a shower in the middle of the day if that's what I decide to do, right? So that when we are leading teams that are remotely, we need to recognize that the best ideas don't happen when people are sitting at their desk. So you can't be afraid to give people the time that they need to sort of work through those ideas if it's a creative problem you're trying to get the solution to. But why don't we do that? Why don't we tend to give people the time they need to come up with ideas?
Because
I'm interested in your experience.
It's not conventional, and especially in this virtual environment, to be seen sometimes is not to be productive, is the perception. Or rather, to be not seen is to not be productive in, that's just the perception.
Yeah. Yes. I think you're right. I think you're right, TJ. I think what connects to that is really the sort of the end lesson of creativity we're going to talk about today. So Kim says that it's a lack of understanding the process. They're stuck in old ways of how we're supposed to work. Yes, right. And the old way of how we're supposed to work is like, I see you doing something, therefore I believe that you are doing something productive at work, right? And now you lose that ability to see people. But what we actually have is a deficit of trust. So here is the magic potion, right? Here's the magic potion that will help you to reduce fear, that will allow you to read people better and pick up on social cues better. It increases your ability to communicate, but it also increases creativity. And there's studies that show all of these side effects of this chemical, right? And this chemical is oxytocin. And you can buy it and spray it into your nose, but that's the less conventional way of getting oxytocin, right? The more conventional way is by developing trust, right? By developing trusting relationships with people. Oxytocin is a chemical that bonds mothers to their children. It's the chemical that generates feelings of trust inside each of us, that lets us know that we are able to, or gives us the feeling that we're able to trust someone else. If it's overused, actually, oxytocin leads to dishonesty, but it's dishonesty that actually like protects the in-group. It's envy and it's gloating and it's things that are sort of those abnormal or maladaptive behaviors that promote one group over another group. But oxytocin happens when you trust, or trust happens when you have oxytocin. So the question becomes, like, how do we get the benefit of this oxytocin? Like, how do we build trust in this remote environment? And I do want to stop for 1 second and make sure that we're talking about the same thing when we talk about trust. So in our human intelligence curriculum, we say that trust is believing when given the chance, you will not do something damaging to me. Right? There's a few important parts to this one as well, right? The trust is an action verb. Trust is a choice that you make, right? You choose to trust someone. You choose to offer up your idea with the belief that if I make myself vulnerable and I offer up the idea that I've got bunions, or that I think I have some unconventional way to solve this problem we've been struggling with, that the group is not going to reject me for that idea. They don't have to like the idea, right? But I know that they're not going to do something damaging to me. They're not going to try to make me smaller. That when we have trust, we're all trying to build up the team and do the things that we need to do to solve the problems that we face. Here's a trick for building trust if you're leading a team. When you act as if someone is trustworthy, there's a shot of oxytocin that's released. But that oxytocin is released in the other person, right? If I treat you as if you were trustworthy, you get the shot of oxytocin that says that you should be able to trust me. So what happens is, when we are willing to make ourselves vulnerable, when we're willing as leaders to offer up, our ideas, or create the environment that tells people about our own, personal failings or personal weaknesses, or I allow you to see my background, right? As all of you on here are doing as well, rather than the virtual background that's back there. I'm letting you see, like, this is it, right? I'm a person. This is how I live, and it helps to, in small measures, begin to develop that trust. And that's how trust builds, right? People take a risk, they see how it's going to work out. When you respond favorably, now they know that, all right, I'll try to take another risk and I'll see what happens. Teams that trust are teams that share ideas, right? And teams that share ideas and collaborate effectively are the ones that have the best creativity. So what's the very practical applications of this? Here's some quick hits we'll go through, and then we'll do some questions. So if the principles remain the same, whether I am doing creativity in my traditional work environment or I'm doing it remotely, what changes? So one, I would say that the mechanics change. Truthfully, the mechanics should be the same, right? I should be able to do these same things in a traditional work environment, but I can get away with a lot more in a traditional environment. But when I'm working with people and I want them to focus and be creative, usually work on divergent thinking, I need to be a lot more disciplined about these things. One, I need to keep it specific. I need to ask one question, right? And be pretty specific about my question. So for instance, I may say, how might we improve our responsiveness to local customers in the next 30 days? Something that puts a nice, tight bound around the thing that we're trying to solve. this puts a lot of the work on the leader, right? The leader needs to determine what the question is, right? Typically, we will not spend very much time defining our question, and now the answers we get are kind of all over the place because I didn't do a good job of telling you what it is we're actually trying to do. Alex Osborne, the guy who invented brainstorming, said that a problem well stated is a problem half solved. So as the leader of a group that you want to be creative, you take on that burden of ensuring that you at least start with a question that you think is right. You may have to change it along the way as you learn more about what's going on, but you spend the time thinking about not just a question like, how can we be better, but how can we serve local customers and improve our responsiveness actually to customers in the next 30 days. So ask one question. 2, keep the group small. So on the Freakonomics podcast, Stephen Dubner asked Teresa Amabile, what's the best way to make a group of 10 people more creative? And she said, the best thing you can do to make a group of 10 people more creative is to get rid of half the people, right? She says that to get the optimum amount of creativity, you need about 5 to 7 folks, right? It's easier for me to trust 5 to 7 folks. Plus it allows people plenty of opportunity to share their ideas and feel like their ideas are being heard. So keep your group small. If you have a large team, then go back to asking a specific question to one group that's about 5 or 7 people and ask another specific question to another group of 5 or 7 people. Or you can ask the same question and then you do the work of combining those answers at the end, and then keep it short, right? People's attention spans are incredibly short. So I try to be very jealous of that attention, but also very respectful of the attention. If I say it's going to be 30 minutes, it's going to be 30 minutes, and then we're going to be over and you can go on to something else, and people can have some reason to trust me that I'm going to be respectful of their time, and they will, it's easier for people to focus for that 30 minutes than it is for some never-ending meeting that we're in. So that's one. The second are the tools. So there's tons of paid tools that you can use out there. There's Miro and there's Mural, and there's some of those they're obviously very effective, but there's also some learning curve that comes to those. Some things that we use on our team as we were having to convert all of our in-person training into training that is, it was all virtual, are Google Slides and the AWE app. So Google Slides, I can set up a slide. I've never had to teach someone how to use Google Slides. We already know because people use PowerPoint. It's a pretty intuitive interface. And what I will do is I will set up 3 or 4 blank slides with that question, and now people can do their brainstorming directly on those slides. It's super easy, and I share the link out to everyone, giving everyone permission to edit if they have the link. The other one, AWE app, is a big, it's a whiteboard thing. It is free. There's a free version. You can share and invite people to your AWE app panel, and it's less capable, but I think easier to use, little brother or sister to Mural or Miro. The other thing to do is to embrace humanity, right? So people don't like Zoom meetings, right? You've probably all read the articles about Zoom fatigue, right? People get tired of being on Zoom. And what I argue is that the reason people get tired for being on Zoom is a couple reasons. One, the meeting that they're in probably sucks, right? People are not being respectful of their time. You probably didn't have to have the meeting in the first place. You probably could have had an email or had some asynchronous conversation that would have covered the same things. You're not certain when the meeting's going to start or when the meeting's going to end. And that whole time your mind is thinking about what else could I or should I be doing with this time that's going on there. So if you're leading the meetings, you control all of those things, right? You can narrow those things down. The other thing that happens, and even in this group, right? There's only a few brave souls that were willing to share their faces, but sharing your face is important for creativity because it's important to trust, right? If I can look someone in the eye is actually the phrase that we use for when I can know if I can trust someone. So when people share their faces, not only do I get the benefit of seeing them looking at me, so I'm not just speaking into an abyss, right? I recognize their humanity as well. They can pick up not only on what I'm saying, but whether my actions reinforce my words, right? Our brains have a special section of the brain that is all about working with human faces. right, is different than object recognition. It is the piece of the brain that interprets just faces. There's a great story about a person who unfortunately had an accident. They had a traumatic brain injury, and they lost their ability to identify objects. They couldn't say what a cup was or what a pencil was, but they could identify faces perfectly. In fact, there's some pieces of art where there are faces that are constructed out of vegetables and fruits. Right here. And this person could identify that this was a face and knew that it represented a person, but couldn't identify any of those pieces, right? They couldn't name the corn or the peas or the onions, right? Our brains, human brains, are designed to recognize faces. So when you are on Zoom and you share your face and you're trying to encourage creativity, it's an important step. But the reason people get tired is because they have essentially performance fatigue, right? People feel like they are performing online, particularly if you can see your own face and you know what's going on. So as a leader, remove the performance part, right? If we trust each other, then you're able to share your ideas and you just get natural fatigue, not fatigue because we're online together. And I know with our team that spread across the US, as we were creating new pieces of curriculum or new lessons, and we began to develop more trust, the fatigue started to decrease as well, because we knew that we were talking to people who were respectful of our ideas, and we're all working to build each other up. So if you want to be more creative in your workplace, basic formula is one, to ask for it. Ask for more creative solutions, and you're going to get more creative solutions, as long as you respond in a way and you generate a psychologically safe environment. And then two, you practice it. The more you do it, the better off you get at doing it. You increase your creative confidence and you're able to solve those problems that you were not ready to tackle before. So I'm going to stop there. We still have some time left for questions. So feel free to come off mute. You can use the Q&A or you can use the chat, and we'll talk about whatever you'd like to talk about here in the closing time. Hey, Brenda, thanks for sharing your face with us. All right, so I'll ask you some questions. So what do you think is the biggest barrier to creativity on your own teams? So Dion says Dion's talking, but I didn't hear him say anything.
No, I'm listening. I was just clicking, make sure I was still on mute to hear what you were saying.
Perfect. So what are the biggest obstacles to creativity on your own teams?
I would say for me, possibly groupthink would be one of the barriers. And what I mean by groupthink is there's a tendency for the group to be the catalyst, and as a result, individuals have a reluctance to want to share their natural ideas for want of being seen to be going against the collective.
Right. Yeah. So so collaboration is one of the skills that we teach, right? We teach critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication. But the core of all of those, truthfully, is the collaboration aspect. We teach critical thinking, and I can tell people how the different cognitive biases affect them. I can give them tools to recognize when it's happening to them and ways to avoid it. But even knowing all those things, you're still going to fall back into the same cognitive biases. Sort of our end lesson for critical thinking is that you get better by collaborating. When I collaborate with other humans in a psychologically safe environment, TJ's cognitive biases get offset by my cognitive biases. And then my cognitive biases are also offset by John's. And we work together so that we actually get to the truth of the matter, the real problem that we're trying to work on. And now we can focus our creativity on that thing. But if you don't have that psychologically safe environment, you end up with essentially what TJ is alluding to, right? You end up with groupthink. And now instead of having our biases offset by other people, one person's cognitive biases infect everyone else. And now we're worse off than if we had never collaborated at all, because we get all the worst from one place and we're not able to bring it together. So what's the way out, right? The way out is to build trust. And I argue that the fastest way to start to build trust is by making the choice to be vulnerable. When you make that choice to treat someone as if they are trustworthy, then they respond by rewarding that trust. So I would encourage you to do that, even if it's as simple as making sure that you take the time to talk about some important moment of change, maybe in your own life, or something that goes beyond just what did you do this past weekend, but what's the last like really meaningful thing that happened in your life. And sharing those types of stories makes people more human, and that vulnerability builds trust. So thank you, TJ. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I think it was one of these meetings that someone had the concept of the highest paid person's opinion, the HIPPO. You know, in a corporate environment, you tend to defer to the people in the positions of authority, and so their approach, their attitude will have a big effect on whether the team is able to bring out ideas.
Yes, you're exactly right, John. So what I hear this from the military groups that I go back and talk to, or folks in the government as well, right? It's very obvious in the military who is the highest paid person, right? We literally wear it on our shoulders. The seat at the front of the table is always for that person. But what I tell folks is that if you are leading a team, you have the opportunity to change that paradigm for your team, right? And it is your responsibility as a leader, if you want more creativity, to ensure that you are not reinforcing that paradigm. So in the story I told about the ISIS drones, like one of the very simple things that I did with that group was refuse to sit in the chair that's at the head of the table, right? Everybody knows the person in charge sits in that chair, but by simply sitting on the side of the table, it was this, very seemingly minor sign that I'm not running this like I'm giving you orders, right? I'm running this meeting because I want to hear the ideas that you're bringing. And those small steps allowed people to make the initial step of trust, to trust me and trust the rest of the group with their ideas. They see that they are free from interpersonal negative risk when they share those ideas, and now the next person does it, and the next person does it, and now you start getting those ideas that you need. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it, John. So if you want to know more, so what's the next step? So there's a couple things that we do. One of them is the Monday morning human intelligence session. So TJ is a frequent attendee at the Monday morning human intelligence. I think he's attended 9 or 10 of them so far. We've only done, I think, 14. So talk to TJ if you have any questions about it. But what we do is it's a strict 30 minutes talking about something related to critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, or communication. We'll have a guest join us and they talk about how they apply those things in their own lives. And it's something that can shake up your brain on a Monday morning. The time listed there is an Eastern time, but it's 10 o'clock here in Birmingham, and you have the bit.ly link down there. The capitalization is important in that link, and that'll take you to it. And the other thing we do is on our website, on our blog, the Human Intelligence blog, we post some pretty deeply researched articles that are related to these things, but they always give you something practical that you can do with them, so that right away, if you spend the 5 to 7 minutes to read them, you'll be able to leave with some very practical things you can do to make yourself and your team better creative thinkers, critical thinkers, better collaborators, or better communicators. So I appreciate the opportunity, Christina and Tech Birmingham, for having me. I will also post my my LinkedIn profile in the chat, so I'd be glad to connect with anyone here, and look forward to learning more about all of you and being back in Birmingham. Thank you.
This is great. Thank you. I appreciate this look on creativity, because I think it's so important that, our work life has shifted. And I think, there was this concern up front where, in the beginning of the pandemic, that there was going to be this loss of collaboration and creativity because people were not in the same room together. But what you're saying, Dan, is that people have their best ideas when they're not at their desk. And so if, office environments, work environments foster that creativity, essentially they'll get better products from their workers. Is that kind of what, is that where you're going with some of this training?
Well, so there's two pieces of that. One is, if you look at what folks have done since the pandemic forced us to change, right? So the pandemic put us in a place where the previous status quo was, we couldn't pretend that it worked anymore, right? It was completely broken, and we had to find some different way. So when we needed to find some different way, we did, right? And what you see is, things like this, right? You see navigating the new normal. In our case, we had to convert all of our training to Zoom, but now it allows us to provide your training in a lot of different places at we don't have to travel to do it, and it gives us more flexibility. But we didn't do that before because we could still hang on to the old ways of doing things. So the thing to remember is that the same creativity that allowed you to overcome these problems now existed in yourself and in your team prior to the virus, right? You didn't learn these skills as soon as the virus came. The virus breaking the status quo just gave you the opportunity to apply those. Not just the opportunity, you either had to apply those or you had to close up and do something different. So it's holding on to that creative confidence as we continue to move on. And then the second piece is recognizing that work is not simply sitting in front of a desk, jamming on a spreadsheet, right? That I can be doing some of my best work walking my dogs in the woods because I'm coming up with the idea that's going to allow me to solve a problem and revolutionize what we're doing.
Sorry, my babysitter is telling me she's got to go to work to her other job. So sorry.
But even no, I don't think you have to be sorry at all, right? Because that is your humanity, right? That is what Christina, that is, your kids are very important to you and important to the work that you do. And knowing that you have kids and that you're carving out the time to be able to do this, while also making sure that your kids are taken care of, is who Christina is. Right? So now I know you better, and that gives me the grounds to trust you more. And I'm more likely to trust you with my ideas if I see you as a real person, not as this fictitious being that I've created that has the perfect Zoom background and is everything's working out great for. So thank
you.
I think you don't have to apologize. I think we don't have to apologize for being humans.
Thank you. That is, I think it's refreshing to hear that. I mean, I don't want anyone to think that I work in a horrible work environment. Dion and Rebecca give me so much grace,
no.
and
I believe in child labor. I steal good ideas from her kids all the time.
The naked dance is a funny one. My kids will be, sometimes they will run behind me naked, trying to play in the mud and stuff. So. But I think, we need to extend a lot more grace, during this time and, going forward, because I think you're right. The more that we trust each other and see each other as humans and not some sort of image that we've built up for each other, that allows us that grace to want to collaborate and to be creative with this other person. It fosters that trust, like you said. So thank you for bringing up those points. Dion, do you have anything else that you would like to say?
No, just Dan, thank you for taking time to unpack all of this for us. This is very, very critical and important work, and I'm grateful because I believe it gives us something to strongly consider when we begin shaping the return to normal, because normal wasn't working. And I think this should change the dynamic. This should change how we interact with one another, the spaces in which we work. So super fascinating. I'm grateful for your time, grateful for you all for joining us. And I guess I will just quickly wrap us up. Christina, Rebecca, as always, thank you. Again, youtube.com/techbirmingham. We will be uploading the video there. And we will also be sending out a follow-up email that'll be coming from Rebecca. And maybe, I don't know, we probably won't include the portion of Justin, Nelson, and TJ rapping, but that just means you have to join us on the next go round. Those are only for the people who join us live. We can't put that on YouTube. So with that said, have a great day, and thanks again, everybody.